I'm Shaahin Cheyene, a Amazon expert and author of the book Billion, How I Became King of the Thrill Pill Cult, which will be coming out close to August. And my co-host, Bart Baggett, a motivational success coach and strategist, amongst other things. Bart, how are you doing today?
I think you can add professional comedian to that list, Shahin. I just got back from Los Angeles doing some stand-up comedy. LA is open, so all our creative aspirations of writing and performing, in addition to making tons of money, we can do it all. I think that's the problem. Can we do it all? Do you think we can do it all?
I think we could do it all. That's pretty amazing, dude. And I think that's going to go a long way. I've got a lot of questions for you, but I think that's going to go a long way today towards our talk about fear, because there's something about public speaking. I think like that's most people's like one of their biggest fear, but there's another thing about doing comedy in front of people, and I've heard that like bombing in front of an audience is probably like the most terrifying thing people have ever experienced. I know Joe Rogan talks about that a lot.
It's a painful experience, and I'm lucky to have only had fractions of bombing since I've been playing around with the art of stand-up comedy. But today we're going to talk about overcoming fear, talking about fear as far as how it motivates people in politics, motivates people in their personal life. It keeps you from getting the woman you want, the man you want. It keeps you from starting businesses. I mean, fear is crippling, and especially in the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen fear used as a weapon, politicized all over. And some of us wildly succeeded in this environment of field, and some people got frail and hid for a year and a half. So this is the topic today. So if you ever had fear, anxiety, self-consciousness, what if they laugh at me? What if they don't love me? Stay tuned.
Yeah. Well, Bart, I want you to fear not. I've got Hugh McDonald's book right here. And this is the funny thing. We talk a lot about synchronicity. It's been a very synchronistic week. So I was cleaning the garage later today, and this kind of fell and hit me in the head. So it's kind of an amazing book. I think it's like from the 70s with this guy who looks a little bit constipated, and he's a former detective, and it says safe common sense advice for dealing with every kind of crime. Every kind of crime. You don't have to worry, because Hugh McDonald, LAPD, is going to show you how to survive. Let me turn that sound off there. So I thought that was pretty funny. But then on the back, he makes even broader claims. This is the book that can save your life. Prepare, don't panic. So I don't know what's in here. I've never read it, but it kind of ended up in a bunch of.
You would have to have some fear of being dead, attacked, raped, molested, and or to even buy that book off the shelf, right? I mean, if you're constantly worrying about survival, I mean, Maslow says survival is one of our ultimate needs, but I don't think of the word survival and fear unless I'm in like an end of days movie.
That is true. That is true. From what I've seen lately, I think there's probably an equal amount of fear of the police these days as there are of criminals. So, and that's always been a weird thing, right? Because you ever see like, like cops and criminals, like you ever see them hanging out, like there's situations like in prisons and whatever. And you just notice that there's like a thread between the two. Like there's something that's like, kind of similar, because they're kind of both in the world of crime. One is fighting the crime and the other is committing the crimes, but there is almost like a camaraderie between them. You'll notice that in like all the mob movies where you have like the informant who's effectively a criminal, and then you've got the police officer, but that there's always some like line of connection between the two, some similarity there.
Well, and how you motivate people. I mean, you have to find leverage, especially in like an interrogation, leverage, even negotiating with your kids to do like the dishes. There's leverage. I've seen kids of like, oh my God, I'm going to lose access to my phone. I guess I'll go to bed now. Like there's a fear of consequences. I don't know if fear is the right word, but there's this sense of consequences, which is a very adult way to look at it. But if you're not in your adult brain, if you're in your primal brain, it's fight or flight. And that's kind of where we come down. And if you look at the politics, if you look at the Third Reich, if you look back in 1938, how did Hitler get elected? Fear, fear, fear. You're afraid of these people. These people are going to take your home. You see it now. The people are going to take your home. They come over the border. They're going to steal everything you have. Therefore, you have to vote this way. It's a fear-based thing. And I always, if I have any sort of fear, I always tell myself, wait a second. Do I really want to make a decision out of fear, or do I want to make a decision out of informed, intelligent, moving toward values versus moving away? That's the way I work. At least I do my best to work that way.
Yeah, it's definitely a strong motivator. I mean, I know we're both fans of Tony Robbins, and it's funny. A buddy of mine called me the other day. He's like, "Hey, what about this book and this website?" And I'm like, looking at some like self-help guy who's just starting out, and I'm like, "Dude, just get Awaken the Giant Within, get the Edge program, just get like 3 of Tony's like programs. Listen to him because it's much better, and it's really all you need. He is the best in the world. You might think he's cheesy, you might think he's like a little rah-rah. You're like, who the fuck is this guy? He's all like, gianted out or whatever. But you know what? He's the best fucking self-help guru in the world, and it works. So, if you do it. So I'm like, dude, you don't need to go through all these like third-rate guys selling courses and doing all. Just buy Tony Robbins, and his book costs $10. Just buy his book. That's all you need, right?
If they implement it. The problem with all self-help books, and me having authored 4 or 5 of them, like they have to implement it, and it's difficult to implement concepts that you don't agree with. So for example, if you're trying to teach someone, which is something Tony does and I do, and even you do, about the belief structure, like if you believe that all people are bad or all men are bad, that feels like it's just a chapter in a book. But then what they say is, especially someone's a victim, that's different. That doesn't apply to me. My situation's different. My dad was bad to me. I'm different. I live in this country, and everyone has this little dialogue that it doesn't apply to them. And then they don't listen to it. And that's the challenge with books, which is why seminars and coaching and all that stuff comes into play. I don't have any criticism on that because some people need more direction. I had a parent that was a great salesperson that sent me to Tom Hopkins seminars at 14 years old. Like I began thinking I could be on stage when I was 14. So to me, it wasn't scary because my dad was on stage. That's how I met my mom. He was giving a class on personality. I don't know if you knew that story. He was giving a class on personality. My grandmother came, thought he was handsome, brought back my mother, and they ended up getting married. So like being a speaker in my family was just what people did. So I never had a big fear of public speaking. Now comedy, we'll save that for later. There was a little bit of fear there.
Wow. Great story. Yeah. Mad respect to Tom Hopkins, one of the all-time greats. And he's started doing some YouTube videos and interviews again. So I invite you guys to look at it because he really, he was the one. Tom Hopkins is like an old school salesman from, I guess, like 70s and 80s, and you look at the guy and he's got the electroplated suit and the, slicked back hair. And you're like, oh, this fucking douchebag. And then you listen to him and you're like, he's got you nodding and agreeing with him and feeling for him. And then you want to buy everything he's selling. And you're like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. And he was the first guy that actually taught me to get past my fear of sales. So I think it's a very salient point on your end about the importance of action, right? And we talk about this a lot. I talk about it in my book, and we also talk about this in my course, is that you need those 3 things. And we'll talk about those 3 things and further on in the episode. So hang on, you guys. We're going to talk about hacking fear and how you can hack fear and overcome so your fear becomes your servant and not you its.
Before you go on, let me ask you a question about that. You said you had a fear of sales because I've got a sales team. I've got a sales team in India. I've got a sales team in America, and some of them are amazing. They have the same number of calls, and some of them don't produce. And just like my dad used to lead the country at IDS, he would just see that some people rose to the top. Same training. Did you have a fear of rejection, or did you have a fear of looking like a salesman or looking cheesy? Like think back when you thought, "Oh my God, I can't be a salesman." What was going on in your brain? Because you clearly overcome it now, but when you were 21, what were you thinking?
Well, it was when I was in my teens, I kind of overcame it, right? So I was a kid and, it was odd for me to approach people because of primarily fear of rejection, but also because, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I felt like, well, I don't really know what I'm selling. And that's actually how I started. I went down to Chinatown and to get over my fear, I listened to Tom Hopkins and I went to Chinatown. I bought a bunch of these little vials of herbal, whatever it was. And back in the days, you used to have to break off the top of the glass and drink the liquid inside these little vials. They couldn't figure out how to get a cap on there, I guess. And so I went to Chinatown and I bought them for, 20 cents a piece. And I walked up to the stairs in Brentwood. They have these steps where all these fit people walk. And I stood at the top of the stairs. And I mean, my palms were sweating. My face was sweating. I was just like super nervous. I was a kid. I think I was like 14 or 15. And I was just like, need an energy drink? And they'd be like, what? And I'd be like, need an energy drink? And they'd be like, yeah, sure, kid. And they'd take one. I'd be like, it's $2, please. And I did that, and I made good money doing that, because I was making a pretty good turn on those things. And that, kind of was one of the initial motivators for me. And, once I did that enough, I kind of got over the fear, because then I stopped seeing people, as being above me and like lording something over me. And I started thinking about, hey, these guys are, they're working up a sweat. They're tired. They've never heard of this. This is a cool thing. They're laughing. They're enjoying it. They like that a kid sold it to them. And so I'm really bringing a service and a product to them. Plus, the more I do this, the more money I make, So
Let me tell you a great hack that I
yeah.
did on myself when I was 18.
Yeah.
I was at Pepperdine. I had my first job in the mortgage brokerage firm. So I was in Beverly Hills, Golden Triangle, richest place in the world, right? And my job was to call all around these mortgage companies and find out the prices on these $60 million companies. I'm 18. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, right? And I knew I wasn't going to buy the property. So I felt kind of like a scammer, because my job was to get the price, how much is it, what square footage, right? And I just felt like, I'm not going to buy the property. I shouldn't be calling them. And so they would have to leave a message, right? And a couple of days went by and I was like, man, I go to this. So I literally told the receptionist my name was Bob. And so I would pretend to be Bob, and then they would call back and give Bob the parameters. And all of a sudden it wasn't Bart anymore. And when I finally figured out that it doesn't hurt if they say no, it doesn't hurt if they say yes. And the fact is, they don't know who Bart is. They don't know who Bob is. They don't know who Jack is. And it finally clicked on me. Oh my God, nobody cares me. No one cares rejection. It was so stupid, but it's funny because if you pretend you're not you, all of a sudden you could do the action and it makes no sense. It's like wearing a costume to sell those little vials. It was so stupid of me, but it was really, my brain was, what if they reject me? What if they don't want me? And that little trick changed my mind. I'm like, you know what? It's a girl, a pretty girl, a guy. I'll just call up and say, this is Bart, because they don't know who Bart is anyway.
That's a really good hack. So guys, by the way, I wanted to share with you these glasses. These are A-View glasses. Our good friend AJ from Saint Motel is launching these. Pretty awesome. He sent these to me. So this is actually pretty cool. So check this out. So the lenses come out and you get different colored lenses. So I think he's got all kinds of programs where you can get, selections of lenses, multiple lenses in different colors. So, you got a pair of glasses and you can wear these, when you're on your computer or later on in the evening. And then, you can interchange regular glasses. So it's just kind of a cool thing. We're going to try to get AJ. He's the lead singer of the band Saint Motel. They've sold millions of albums, filled stadiums. And, AJ actually is part of my Amazon program, our Amazon Mastery program. And, we've been working together for a little while, and I'll look forward to actually getting him on the show. So I wanted to share that with you guys.
I subscribe to Saint Motel's channel on YouTube,
yeah.
Which, by the way, you should subscribe to this channel as well, the Hack and Go Rich channel, because it gives you a notification. And so I'm always, cool, AJ's got a new song. And I'm like right there because YouTube tells you. So if you haven't subscribed to AJ's channel or Hack and Go Rich, do that. I got so much street cred for hanging out with AJ at the polo match from my 17-year-old niece. She thinks I'm the coolest uncle in the world now because Saint Motel is a big band. So God bless AJ and his coolness.
He is such a badass. He is such a badass. And their music is so good. It's just, you know what? It's just happy, feel good music. And yeah, absolutely. So let's get into a little bit of news, and then we'll go into talking about some hacks for how you can hack fear. We can talk about panic, anxiety, whatever you guys want to talk about today. We'll get in there. And for all you guys joining us on Facebook, make sure to like us and share if you think there's anybody who's struggling with fear, feeling stuck, deals with panic, anxiety. We're going to give you a surefire formula today on how you solve that. But just before we do, I wanted to share a little bit of Amazon news for all you fans of Amazon, Amazon sellers, Amazon FBA sellers, and people that are just Amazon customers. So as we are staring down the barrel of Prime Day, I think there's been an early start to Prime Day, Amazon's biggest shopping holiday of the year. We've got some news from our man Jeff, who I am a huge fan of, and we're going to share there. Bart, can you see my screen?
It is starting now. We have touchdown.
All right. So, and I don't know how I got this news. Usually I get it on different news channels, but I guess today it's brought to us by Fox News. And Bezos basically planning to go into space aboard his Blue Origin flight. I think once you have as much money and influence as he does, he's literally reaching for the sky. And so I thought this was really interesting. And they're auctioning off tickets. So you too can join, Bart, you as well, it's currently up to $2.8 million for a ticket with Bezos and his brother Mark on the Blue Origin flight going to the edge of space and back, hopefully. But the more interesting news, and by the way, there's I think like close to just under 200 people that are bidding on this right now at $2.8 million. It'll be a great publicity move. Plus, it's probably worth that much if you're an Amazon seller. I would want to do it just to hang with Jeff Bezos for. I don't know how long it takes to get into space, but imagine you dude's sitting right next to you. I've got lots of questions for him, and those questions, believe me, would be worth more than $2.8 million. So maybe I'm going to bid on this. But here's what I thought was interesting, and this will go into our conversation a little bit. So do you see my screen now?
It's all good. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So thousands, and this is a true story, 1,000 signed petition for Jeff Bezos not to re-enter to Earth, not to return to Earth after his Blue Origin flight. So I think this is a little bit tongue in cheek. It's got to be a little bit of a joke. It says a satirical petition, but they've had 25,000 signatures of people asking for him to stay into space. And so the reason why I bring this up, and this has made news. Somehow this has made news, which is super interesting. The reason why I bring this up is I have a lot of, in the past, I think anybody who's successful at anything, and Bezos really, he's the top of the heap, right? Coming from D.H. Hutton, a big VC, generated, access to cheap money, use that money to grow a company, even though he wasn't getting profits for many years, to grow that company to become one of the largest companies in the world, certainly the largest e-commerce marketplace in the world. And, the fact is, anytime you succeed, there will be haters. Doesn't matter who you are, right? It's so much easier to look at somebody. And when you're scared, this goes into fear because these people are scared, to look at somebody who's successful and to just poo-poo whatever it is that they're doing. Right? You don't know this person. You don't know the fact that this person has paid their dues or what kind of dues they've paid or what they've done. You don't know any of this stuff. But people have a tendency, it's so easy because it makes them feel a little bit better about themselves. Partially, a lot of the times, because they feel that they can't achieve that person's level of success. So it's just easier to poo-poo them. Somehow they feel like it brings them up. And so, it's very interesting. In the early days of, for you guys who don't know my story, I started a product called Herbal Ecstasy, a company in the 1990s, and I write about it in my book. And we created over $1 billion in revenue pre-internet. This was before Amazon, before Bezos, before Elon Musk did any of this stuff. And we created a pill that was a legal alternative to the drug MDMA, which I think now they call Molly. And the pill became a global phenomenon. And I thought, hey man, I'm the underdog. I always had this ideal that I was the underdog. And Bart, it was really funny because no matter what I did, there was always detractors. And so my philosophy became, it's like everywhere I went, there was people who loved me, but then there was people who hated me. Right. And you couldn't have one without the other. There was never a time where I was like, oh, people are just on the fence. It was like, if you have lots of people who love you, you're going to have lots of people that will also hate you. And, there was a period of time where I would, literally walk into a restaurant, or we would, go somewhere, and you could literally see the room, like people who would like gravitate away from me and people who would gravitate towards me. Right. And that was fine. It was always fine for me, especially during my, 15 minutes of fame with herbal ecstasy, doing that. And then every once in a while, I'd find somebody that really hated me, somebody that either they found out about who I am and what I did, and it just struck a chord with all decency. And usually those are the people that, are the most corrupt. Um, or it was just somebody that hated everything about what I did. And, they weren't all like right wing, ultra conservatives. A lot of the time, these were people in the drug scene who were like, ecstasy is a sacred drug, and I can't believe you've made a natural version of it. Like, you are a blasphemer. And so it came from both ends. So, with herbal ecstasy, that happened for a while. And I had a lot of people who hated me and put up websites and did all kinds of things. I think now we call them trolls, right? But back then, it was like a normal thing. But I haven't had that for a long time, right? I've shifted to becoming an Amazon expert, an Amazon seller. I've been selling on Amazon since Bezos opened up the platform and allowed us all to go on there and sell our third-party things. And I teach my course where I empower other people to create awesome products, right? And sell them in different platforms, but the Amazon platform as well. I think AJ's glasses are only available direct from him, by the way, now. So we'll share a link to his glasses later. And, recently for the release of my book, I've been doing podcasts. So I average about 2 or 3 a day now that I'm doing success podcasts, whatever. And I don't prejudice. If they ask me to do a podcast, I will look. And if their stuff looks cool and they look like a cool person, I will have a conversation, because I want to bring my story to as many people as possible. So Thursday, we had a booking that had happened a few days before, and I was supposed to be on the show on Friday. And the guy had asked for a press kit and a copy of the book and links to my podcast and everything. And I'd sent them all to him. And, a lot of times these podcast hosts are doing so many of these things that they don't really like read that stuff. And I had just done Adam Carolla's podcast a couple of days ago, and that was super awesome. Love Adam Carolla, such an awesome guy, who's like a real journalist, right? He's a real, journalist, comedian, star, personality, fantastic, but, a real show. And this was a smaller podcast. And the guy, I guess he took a look at my profile like 15 minutes before. I guess that was the guy's MO. And he called my assistant freaking out, canceling like last minute. And I thought it was really funny, because it's been a while since I've had anybody be offended by just like my existence. And it's a good sign for me. In my youth, Bart, I would take this as like, I would take some offense to this, but now I was like, oh, who's this douchebag? And I looked him up, and it was even funnier when I saw his thing, because his whole thing was about like hacking business. And it was like he was on some hacking something or other thing. And then he was on some hustle or something, another thing. And he had something about hustling and hacking. And, I looked at his letter, and he was like, oh, I don't think you're a fit for our show. And I was like, oh, and I thought back to the younger me, and I thought, I didn't take rejection so well when I was young. But now I was just like, oh, well, that's awesome. It's more time for me to hang out with my 7-year-old, right? It's more time for me to do more awesome stuff. But it was just a very interesting moment for me when, I was like, oh, that's kind of cool, because now that I'm kind of getting back into doing this stuff, it was just interesting that I could offend somebody again just by my mere existence, right?
I mean, so many people in this world are just begging for some attention. And if you're vanilla, you can't get any attention. And so if you're willing to have a strong opinion and have a position, if you look at Fox News, and I watched this great movie about the Fox News hosts, and they had such strong personalities and opinions, it made everybody love them or hate them. And they were great entertainers. Rush Limbaugh was a great entertainer, whether you like his politics or not. And if you've ever met those people, they know they're entertainers. They're not trying to really change the world with their politics. They're trying to engage people, get the commercial dollars, and the average people are just, oh yeah, I love those guys. So you've done something right if you have haters. I literally had a I hate Bart club when I was in third grade, Shaheen.
Oh
I
no.
hate Bart. Third grade. I don't know what I did. I think I had a little thing with Kiss. I was making mirrors. I was selling. I don't know what I did. But you know what? I was like, that must be something special. If that girl likes me and those people hate me, I'm doing it right in third grade.
Right. Yeah. It's the old PR tale, right? Of if they're not talking about you, you're in trouble. As long as they're talking about you, don't worry about what they're saying, right? And we took that energy back in the 1990s and we turned it into nearly $1 billion in sales just by, it was that negative publicity. It was, the press and the governments and all those coming after us saying, "Hey, this stuff could be dangerous." And people were like, "Oh shit, it could be dangerous." And you know what their brains were translating in that moment, right?
I want some of that if it's dangerous.
They were like, that means it could work. Can I get some? Can I get some? It was really funny, especially when we did all the trade shows and everything. We would do more conservative trade shows at a certain point before they kicked us out of those kinds of things. And we would see executives from big companies, kind of like walking up to the stall and they would look at it and they go, interesting, interesting. And we would be like, would you like to check it out, sir? They'd be like, oh, no, 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 not for me, sir. Not for me, not for me. And they'd walk away. And then sure enough, as soon as they left their colleagues or whoever they were, we'd see them coming back, slipping us the cash or credit card or whatever, or asking us to send someone up to their hotel room with it. So it was pretty funny. But so this isn't so much about us. It's more about you guys. And we want to deliver on what we promise. So let's talk about hacking fear. So we all deal with fear, right? And the question becomes, what is your relationship to fear? So Bart, why don't we start with you? So how do you handle fear? What is your relationship with fear? What was it before and what is it now? How do you coach people to overcome fear? Or can you overcome fear?
Well, most people do have an emotion that makes them feel stuck. And that means they don't go. So it's like having a break on. It's like having an emergency brake. If I'm teaching in a seminar, if I can find the right metaphor, sometimes people go boom, which is why the Bible and all these great books are so good. If you can put something in a metaphorical visual story, people can sometimes understand it. I guess quick example, and I always use something about my life or whatever. Snowboarding. I was always a snow skier since I was 4 or 5 years old, and I was pretty good at it. And the first time I went snowboarding, it really hurt to fall. Have you ever been snowboarding, Shaheen? It is
Yeah,
really painful to
my
fall on
ass
your
was
head.
certain for a week, buddy.
It's not just at your head. Like it is really painful. And my ego was like, I'm a black ski diamond skier. Like I can do this, right? And I've got friends around me. I'm like, no, I can do it, man. And so like the first 2 hours, I would just fall on my head and I was just like, there's something wrong, man. I've got to be able to figure this out. And so I'm like, I'll just go up the blue slope and then the green slope. And the thing about snowboarding is just like anything, there's a technique to it. And if you can figure out the technique, you can move through that. But in snowboarding is interesting because you have to go this way and this way. So I'm moving my hand sideways. There's a point when if you don't do it right, you're going to fall and hurt yourself. But you have to push through that point to get the gravity where you're now in the right position. So if you avoid the point of fear, you're going to fall or you're going to fail. So you have to move through that point of fear to get to the other side where there's safety. And so once I figured that that point of fear meant I'm going to succeed, it changed my brain. And so I was like, hey, and the worst case scenario is I go straight down the black slope and I die. Pretty unlikely. I mean, I know that happened to Cher and Sonny Bono, but yeah, it's unlikely. I'm probably not going to die, but I might, get a head injury. So the thing is, the worst case scenario, talk to the pretty girl, they laugh at you, you do a speech and it's not funny, you get on stage. Like the worst case scenario is they feel awkward for you. Like even in comedy, the audience doesn't want to hate you. They feel awkward. You feel awkward. It's not funny, but they don't hate you. They just kind of feel bad for you. Guess what? That has happened to every great comedian. So my relationship with fear is to recognize it as what it is, not as reality. It's not true. It's just a feeling and feelings pass. And if you can see that and go, you know what, that's a feeling, it's coming from somewhere. Can I decide to not have that feeling? And that goes back to what we're talking about with state management and neurolinguistic programming and Tony Robbins. If you don't believe you can control your feelings, you're kind of stuck in life. Then you're not at cause. You're at basically you're responsive to everything in your environment. You're a pinball. So if you don't think you control your feelings, if you don't think you control responses to your environment, you're a pinball. You'll never have any happiness, and you'll completely be a reactionary. So if you have fear, go, you know what? That is just fear. Just like when I have sadness, or I you know what, that's that emotion. I can sit with it or I can push through it. That's how
Bart,
I deal with it.
Bart, we're hearing from some of the audience that you may need to increase the volume on your mic if you can. I don't know if there's a way to do that. I know you
I
are.
absolutely can. I just was keeping it low so I wouldn't have a lot of bouncy around the voice. Thank you for the audience, by the way. We have an audience. This is new. We're trying the Facebook Live tonight to see if it works.
Yeah, and we'll be opening it up. We'll take a few questions. So if you guys are on Facebook Live, if you know anybody who wants some help, we are here to help. So please put your questions in the comments on Facebook and we will be answering them. We will get to all of them. Don't worry. Okay. So I love that, man. And look, I'm a big fan, Bart, of these old timey guys, much more so than like their old timey books. Cause the books are like, they're kind of like weird and a little outdated or whatever. But I look at these old timey guys. And if you ever meet one of these old timey guys, right? Like Napoleon Hill is dead. And like, Dale Carnegie, I don't think is around. And these guys that wrote these great books, like Think and Grow Rich and, who's it? Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, right? But you see these guys and they really were disruptors in their time because you really only had like, the Bible and like, really stuffy business books that were academic books for colleges at that time. And you really didn't have the whole movement of self-help. So these guys were putting out stuff that would be, the equivalent to like, something totally out of the norm, like they're writing hacking crypto books back in those days. And if you ever meet a guy who, is like that, these old guys, they can get along in any environment, right? You see them, this is the amazing thing. Like they can be in a party with a bunch of millennials and they'll be there and they'll know that their belief system will work in any environment, right? Because it's just what they have such unflinching belief. And one of the great books that I think has always helped me with fear is by a guy named Dale Carnegie. And he's one of these old timey guys. His stuff is totally outdated, but very effective and efficient. And he wrote a book called How to Stop Worrying and Live More, I believe, if I'm not messing it up. And in the book, he talks about pretty much exactly the hacks that you shared with us. He talks about how you hack fear and worry. And one of the most important things about it is that when fear and worry happens, what we have to do is compartmentalize. And for me, this is really important, right? Because my mind will go, right? It's just going to travel to the worst case scenario immediately, as we humans, we have a tendency to. But not only that, it just keeps going. It doesn't end, right? Okay, and this is going to happen. Then I'm going to die and I'll be tortured. And it just goes forever, right? Especially during COVID. We all have dealt with this, especially during, this pandemic. I don't know a single person who hasn't had these like crazy thoughts about like, that brings stress. So his concept is look, in a ship, in these submarines, in these nuclear submarines, they have compartments. So it's true that one compartment can be filled with water. And the staff has a protocol. So if that happens, what they do is they lock that up. So yes, that compartment can overflood, but it doesn't have to overflood the whole ship. They just have to hold off that one section until they can fix the rest of the ship. Right. So compartmentalizing, your fear, it's kind of like when we talked about one of the lessons that I've learned in jiu-jitsu is that you can't always go from a loss to a win. So you can't always go from having a negative thought that's producing stress and anxiety to just a positive, happy-go-lucky thought. Unless you're a single guy, and then you should go up to any woman that's angry and just look her in the eyes and just say, relax. That works every time. But outside of that, the thing that, and Bart's laughing, and outside of that, one great way to do it, and this was the lesson that I learned from jujitsu before I digressed, is that sometimes you have to go from a shitty situation to a less shitty situation. So you go from a position, maybe you're on the mat and the guy is on top of you in a very dominant position, right? You can't get out of that and topple him over. And I mean, you might be able to, but it's very unlikely, especially if it's a skilled person. So what you want to do is maybe just get on your side a little bit and get in a little bit of a less shitty situation. You might still be in a shitty situation, but you're in a little bit of a less shitty situation. And from there, making these micro movements until you get to a place where then you can try to express your, your dominance in that particular position. So I think with fear, that's a really important tactic in that, you compartmentalize and you say, hey, this terrible thing has happened, or this terrible thing could happen, but it's not happening right now. Or if it is, only this much is happening right now. So in the instance of COVID, it's like, yeah, there's this crazy pandemic happening right now, but I don't have it right now. So today I don't have COVID. I'm going to live today as if I don't have COVID. And if tomorrow it happens, then tomorrow it happens. The second thing that he talks about is thinking through, and this sounds almost antithetical. And I don't know how you feel about this, Bart. I'm very interested in hearing your opinion. And then I can give the third component of what he talks about. But the second component of what he talks about is going to the worst possible case scenario and saying, what's the worst that could happen? So I think a lot of people have a tendency to like really get scared by that. But if you say, you know what, let me see what, the worst possible case scenario is, and you go through that. Okay, then what? Okay, then what? Okay, then what would happen? The worst possible case scenario is almost never as bad as the worry about the worst possible case scenario. What do you think about that, Bart? Oh, Bart, you're muted, bud.
My mother is a worrier, and so she worries and has anxiety about things that are not any big deal to me, like where I'm traveling and drive. And I'm always like, well, what's the worst that could happen? And it's really you could die. Like that's always the plane crashes. I'm like, what's the odds of the plane crashing when I go to Canada or whatever? And because in her mind, the worst thing that could happen is death. So that's, I guess, the worst thing could happen in almost any situation. But when you're talking about talking to a pretty girl, making a sales call, that's not really on the table. Even COVID, if you look at the worst thing scenario, yes, it has happened to all of our friends, but a very small percentage of them. And so if you can get people sort of out of their lizard brain of we're going to die and go that, it's useful. The problem is if the worst case scenario is death, now they're linked into that idea and it's hard to pull them out of it. So as a technique goes, if it's a situation like traveling on the train, driving, whatever, late night driving, you don't want to go to that place because your mother and father will go panicky. But if it's not death, then obviously you're like, hey, the worst scenario is they laugh at you, etc. So I like the technique. I'm just mindful that if it is the worst case scenario is something that would devastate them, there's got to be something else, other technique to work with.
Yeah. And so that's really interesting. So the Vikings, right? I'm a huge Viking fan. My wife makes fun of me. Like I am all about Vikings, which by the way, guys, comment if you disagree, but I think it's much better than Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is fantasy. Vikings is real life. So if you haven't seen Vikings, the main show, watch it. It's about the sagas, but the Vikings, you got these dudes that are living a shamanistic, tribal existence in very cold places. And there's this scene in the movie where you're watching these children be taken to where a man is being tortured and then killed. And the guy looks at him and the kids aren't reacting. And, there's a priest that I guess they abducted and, it's part of the story. And the priest is looking in awe as this, person is being killed. And the kid bumps him on the hand. He goes, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "Don't you see what's happening?" He goes, "Oh, it's just death." And they walk away. And you realize that, exactly to your point, that this is how these fierce warriors dealt with that. They devalued it from childhood. Death was not the worst thing that could happen. If you die in the right circumstances, of course, not as a coward in their traditions, you go to Valhalla, right? You end up going to the highest level where you'll be greeted by the Valkyrie, which I guess are beautiful Viking women on horses that drive you off somewhere and get you drunk from horns, things that are in a horn. Psychedelics, I don't know. It's basically a drug fueled orgy with women on horses. That's what happens when you die. So I don't think they were very afraid of dying. And they conquered, you know, England. Most of England, I believe all of England, was run for like over 1,000 years. I mean, I might be getting the timelines wrong, but it's definitely hundreds of years by these like animistic, shamanic, tribal people who just did not give a fuck. And their culture, their lessons that were passed on to them, their traditions of being fierce, were to not fear death. It's not the worst thing that could fucking happen to you. So I think that's really interesting. And
it's called a reframe. I mean, they take this thing that scares you and you reframe it as the happiest moment in the world. Death means nothing and meaningless, but if you believe in Jesus, you have heaven. If you believe in the Vikings, you have Valhalla. You get to hang out with beautiful Norwegian girls where they're feeding you grapes and drugs. Like, who doesn't want that? So literally they reframed the thing that would stop people from attacking and pillaging and said, look, this is the best thing that happened ever. You see it in almost all wars, all crusades from the 1500s. They reframed in Japanese culture that being a pilot that dies in honor is the highest honor in the Japanese army in 1941, right? So you see this reframe. I would call it manipulation from a political sense, but why can't you reframe yourself? Why can't you realize you have this unrealistic fear? It's like, what's the odds I'm going to die on this bus ride? No, this is the awesomest thing that happened is I succeed and then I win. It's just called the reframe in NLP. And obviously the Vikings, I'm hooked now. I really now have to go watch the Vikings. I'm into raping and pillaging from this moment on. Thank you, Shaahin.
No, you are not. You are not. He did not mean that. He's not into that. He was referring to the Vikings. But yeah, you got to watch it, man. It is one of the greatest shows because they talk about, I mean, it's strategy, it's, you know, it's business strategy, it's war strategy, it's like dealing with manipulation, it's all these things that we talk about. But let's move on to the third and final hack, according to Dale Carnegie from How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. And that's just to take ownership of the worst possible outcome and to make a plan in the event that it happens or that it's, you know, near or nigh. So these old-timey guys, the language in these books is really hilarious. You know, when a man comes up with fear, there is always a certain cure to resolve that fear. Like, you know, that's that dude, man. That's the guy. They believed in that stuff. So, you know, if you do come across that, you know, that the third part, the third hack is you take ownership of it and you say, okay, so am I going to die? Is it possible the plane's going to crash? Okay. So if that happens, you know, what's the action I could take? And that comes to what you're talking about. It's about having leverage on yourself. So now you got a plan. You say, okay, so if that's going to happen, then I can do this, this, and this. And so then you're prepared. And you know, Bart, 9 out of 10 times, maybe even more, 99 out of 100 times, our fears are not realized. And then you just feel like a little, you know what? You're like, fuck, I spent all this time worrying about that and it never fucking happened. Right? Or it was nowhere near as bad as I thought it would be. Or I dealt with it masterfully and I learned a really important lesson. And it's in those moments where the learning really happens. So I think, you know, there's something to be said about that.
A quick example, just to bring it home. My mother is a worrier and she lives in part of the country where there's lots of hail and weather. So she worries about the weather for 3 or 5 days a week, that it might come near her house. And then if it came near her house, the hail might hit her car, which, by the way, she has a garage. So like there's this 3 or 4 days worth of anxiety that it might hail even though she has a garage, because she's got to put her, I mean, like that's the whole point, is you're adding up all these hours of worry when it's completely unnecessary, probably won't even happen. And the worst case scenario, the insurance company gives you hail money. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous, but she doesn't know how to control her anxiety. And something else you're talking about is the ability to sort of evaluate worst case scenario, this scenario, and what's it worth to keep worrying. I'm just not a worrier. I just decide I'm going to do it, and I'm going to deal with the consequences because I'm ownership of my choices. I can't control what other things happen. I can't control other drivers. I can't control the pilot, but I'm not going to live my life in fear because one plane might crash. I refuse to do that.
Yeah. All right, guys. So I'm going to give you guys one actionable, let's talk about actionable steps here, right? So if someone's watching this right now, what's an action that you can take? And I'm going to give you one or two that I think are very useful that anybody can do. The first one is a little bit more general. So this is the thing that cures all fear, and it's action. Within reason, you need to take an action immediately when fear rears its ugly head. Anytime you're scared of something, anytime something comes and gives you anxiety or fear, go ahead and do it. If you see that person, you cannot wait to go up there and shake their hand if you're scared of them, because then you'll get that mental chatter. You need to just shut your brain off and walk out and take the action. I guarantee you the results, although maybe uncomfortable at first, will not be. The second is a technique for panic and anxiety that I learned from a guy named Paul McKenna. Now, if you're in the NLP community or a fan of hypnosis, Paul McKenna is one of the greatest hypnotists of our time. He's a TV hypnotist, but he's also published several books. You can find his programs on Amazon, and he is spectacular. He has a golden voice, and it's called havening. It is not a technique that he invented, but what it involves is what Bart was talking about before, is that you break those neural connections to those things that you're afraid of. So look up havening, and you can look up on YouTube, Paul McKenna, havening, and I'll put his name on here. And I will also share it. I might have misspelled it, but you can find it. We're talking about it. This is for the Facebook Live people, but also if you're watching this, just look up havening and Paul McKenna, and you will see. And this is a really interesting technique because what you do is you start to think about that worst possible canary. You start thinking about the worst possible scenario, and you gently start brushing the sides. And then you will move your eyes to the left and to the right. There's a system of this, and you breathe as instructed. And after you're done with this, it's about a 10, 15-minute process each time. It literally wipes the fear out of the body and breaks those neural connections. And there's a lot about it online about how it works, but those would be my two hacks. So the first one is, if you can, take some action. Reasonable, you never want to do anything that could injure yourself or others. So you want to think about it and be intelligent about the move that you make. But if you can, always take some action, which will give you perspective as well, right? So your action could be writing something in your journal. Your action could be making a plan to do something about it the next day, but take an action. And the second thing is look up havening. I think you'll be happy that you did. So Bart, let's go ahead and we can get a couple hacks from you. I know you've already shared a wealth of stuff.
I really like what you said about take action. So I remember back in high school when I was self-conscious to talk to a pretty girl, the cute cheerleader, and I would wait until I thought I had the right phrase, and I think that's a mistake.
Yeah.
You don't wait till you're ready. When you feel the fear, you take a step. And when I changed that in my brain, what I realized is something always funny came out of my mouth. And I know all of you aren't gifted to be kind of funny and clever, but I decided I can't afford to wait because the opportunity will pass me by. So the fear of missing out became more fearful than the rejection that I got. A very funny story about that. I might have told this before, but I met one of these beautiful cheerleaders at one of my class reunions. And I said, by the way, I talk about you all the time because I remember asking you out and you're like, no, thank you. She goes, I have no memory of that. And I've watched you on Facebook. I'm really proud of you. Like, seriously, what was a big deal to me, she didn't even remember rejecting me. And I thought that was just so funny because it seems so painful. So now I always just take action, whether it's a celebrity or somebody at a party. I take that, pick up the phone. I don't know what to say. It always comes to me. Now, as far as stand-up comedy, which is a lot more subtle art, is that it is a matter of writing your name down, going to the open mic, and actually deciding to step out on stage. Because it's very easy to not commit to yourself or not go do that. And recently, I started doing the stage again, and it was challenging for me because it had been through COVID, it had been a long time, and I didn't know what was funny and wasn't not because there's no live audiences. But when I went on stage, it was like this freedom of like, wow, I broke through that anxiety of what would happen if, and guess what? I was great. I wasn't amazing, don't get me wrong, we've gotten better and better, but breaking through that and then getting the muscle prepared to keep doing that when there's a little bit of fear to push through it, that's the muscle I got training over weeks and weeks and weeks. In this particular, remember, I've done it before, but with any new skill, the more you do it, the more you remember that it feels good and it's okay and there's nothing to worry about. People are like, Bart, how did you do 1,500 radio interviews? And I'm like, well, by the time I did 800, Howard Stern called me. Was I nervous? A little with Howard Stern, but after 800 times, what could possibly go wrong? So it's like that 10,000 hours things. The more you make the muscle move, the less and less anxiety will come. And just trust yourself that it will come, but you got to take that first step. So there's my 2 cents worth. And I think we're up right at the top of the hour, brother.
We are, yeah. So action cures fear. I love that. And so, Bart, I know that you've written a book, Lifestyles of the Rich and Happy, Success
Almost.
Secrets.
I would love to have done Lifestyle Rich and Happy. Hello, we talked about that last couple episodes. No, it's called Success Secrets of the Rich and Happy. I also wrote a great book called The Magic Question. They're both on Amazon, but I'll give them to you for free. Just go to getbartsbook.com. They'll be in the show notes, no obligation. I'd love to have them. They're part of my life's work. Getbartsbooks.com and then /success, and we'll have them in the show notes. But yeah, grab them. There's some audio stuff there. The audiobooks are on Amazon. And then you've got a great new book as well, of course. Hit the like button on this, subscribe on the YouTube channel. We love it, and share it with you if you think that you've gotten value from this. Shaahin, you have an Amazon course, and your podcast is coming out called Billion.
Yeah, guys, look, one of the best ways to conquer your fear is to just make boatloads of money, and then you worry about a lot less things. Who's the guy who said, if you think money can't buy you happiness, you just don't know where to shop? It's true. It's true. And one of the quickest ways that I think a lot of people are finding with our buddy who's going into space soon, Mr. Jeff Bezos, is to utilize his platform, utilize Amazon, become an Amazon seller, and create predictable recurring revenue streams while you sleep. While I'm making this podcast and having a chat with my buddy Bart and helping you guys and going on Facebook Live and doing all this cool stuff, I am making money. There are people buying my products on Amazon, and it is spectacular. Now, we've got a course. It's normally $200. For anybody who's listening in right now, reach out to me. I'm going to share my website. I'm going to be sharing it on the Facebook Live right now, and I will give you our 1 hour Amazon crash course, everything you need to start an Amazon business from A to Z for free. So go to ShaahinCheyene.com or just DM me on Facebook if you're listening to this on Facebook Live, and click on course. I'm happy to have a free 15-minute call with you, see if we can plan your future, starting an e-commerce business, starting predictable recurring revenue. And my 1 hour course, crash course, normally $200, yours absolutely free, no obligation. I want to empower you to start thinking about having those recurring revenue streams and that foundational thinking that Bart and I always talk about, so that you can be featured in Bart's next book, Lifestyles of the Rich and Space Going.
Shaahin, your website, your name is very difficult to spell, and I'm from Texas, so saying it is even sometimes tricky. Shaahin Cheyene, 2 A's. And then is there a slash, or is there a button there that says, hey, I want the free course? How easy is it to find
Yeah.
that?
So you can, thank you so much, Bart. So you can go to www.ShaahinCheyene.com. We'll also have that in the show notes, and just click on the link for the course, or you can email me directly. I share my email on my personal website. You can look me up. And I try to respond to all emails personally. So if you have a comment or have a question, you can address it to me directly. And it may take me a minute to get back to you, but I do try to get back to everybody directly. So thank you for letting us know. Bart, is there another way that people can get a hold of you? Do you have an Instagram or?
Yeah, my Instagram is bartbaggett.com is the website, and Bart Bag is with two G's and two T's. I'm very responsive on Instagram. And of course, if for any reason you need a speaker, you want to talk to me about some of your personal stuff, reach out to bartbaggett.com, call my office there in Los Angeles, and we'll help you. I mean, we're really doing this podcast to share this information. We are very blessed to have 20 years of successful businesses, and we have lots of friends in high places. So put a question to us, ask us a question. Those of you on Facebook Live, thank you. This is the first time we've given that shot. I appreciate you telling me about my microphone. And yeah, if you got something we can help you with, we'll address it, and we'll do some research beforehand, and we'll see if we can help you live a little bit more prosperous. We have been very blessed, and we're ready to share it.
I love that. I also have friends in low places in case anybody needs those too. They're all available to you. So on that note, we'll leave you guys. Always stay laughing. Bart, I love your laugh. You got such a great laugh, buddy. Always great to see you and spend time having these conversations, which I hope we can enrich people with. And everyone else on Facebook and beyond, thank you for joining us. I've shared all of Bart's links on the Facebook Live link. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Hack and Grow Rich.
Take care, everybody. Bye now.